Spider-Man Noir. On Earth 90214, Peter Parker was raised during the Great Depression by his aunt and uncle, May and Ben Parker. Peter grew up supporting his aunt and uncle's activism work, but Ben was murdered in retaliation by a businessman for organizing a strike against sweatshops. The businessman was mob boss Norman Osborn, otherwise known as the Goblin. Sometime later, Peter assisted May at a rally in Hooverville, a shantytown built by displaced homeless people during the Depression. The two faced a violent response from the Enforcers, a trio of ruthless hired thugs and former circus carnies who served as the muscle for Osborn, but they were rescued by Ben Urich. Peter then became Urich's protege at the Daily Bugle newspaper, where he investigated the hardships facing New York City's residents, particularly those threatened by Osborn. After Peter accidentally received the tip meant for Urich, he went to a warehouse where Osborn's men were unloading a shipment of stolen antiques. One of the antiques, a spider idol, broke open and released a swarm of spiders. Peter was bitten by one of them, causing him to pass out and dream of a being called the Spider God. When he woke up, he found he now had spider-like superpowers. Peter, while wearing a mask, then went to confront Norman Osborn at his home to try to force him to give up his control over the city, but he was shocked to find Urich there, who had been blackmailing Osborn using his knowledge of the mob boss's dealings in exchange for money to feed his personal drug addiction. Peter cut ties with Urich, and once back home, he fashioned a costume inspired by his uncle's World War I airman's uniform and became the vigilante known as Spider-Man. Peter then went to Urich's apartment to pressure him into helping take down the Goblin, but found him dead instead. Peter then chose to begin disrupting the Goblin's criminal activities, while the Bugle newspaper began portraying Spider-Man negatively. In response, he went to the Bugle building to confront Jonah Jameson about it, only to discover Jameson had been shot and killed. Peter later learned that the man he'd seen wasn't really Jameson at all. Jameson had been replaced by a shape-shifting impersonator known as the Chameleon. At the same time, the real Jameson was being held prisoner by Osborn. This discovery led Peter to hunt for Jameson, a search that led him into confrontation with the Vulture, the same man responsible for murdering Ben Parker, and Peter killed the Vulture to stop him from killing Aunt May. Even though Peter had saved his aunt, May criticized him for killing the Vulture since he could have stopped him without resorting to killing given his powers. She told him that taking lives would diminish what made him human. Spider-Man later tracked Osborn to his torture house and found him and his enforcers holding Felicia Hardy, Urich's previous lover, and Jameson captive. He learned that Osborn had intended to kill Urich, recover the reporter's information on him that Felicia had been keeping, and then eliminate every witness. He also discovered that Felicia had killed the Chameleon after witnessing him murder Urich while disguised as Jameson. Spider-Man defeated the Enforcers, rescued Jameson, and chased down Osborn, who had taken Felicia hostage and cornered him. Peter had the opportunity to kill Osborn, but chose not to, and instead the mob boss was killed by Sergei Kravinoff. Months after the Goblin's death, Spider-Man investigated a dangerous new mob boss known as the Crime Master. During this investigation, Peter grew infatuated with Felicia, though she didn't reciprocate his feelings to the same degree since their lives were very different. Peter later interviewed Dr. Otto Octavius alongside his friend and fellow news writer Robbie Robertson. Robbie strongly suspected something sinister about the Doctor and tried to convince Peter of it, though Peter didn't take these suspicions too seriously. Peter then learned that the Crime Master was abducting many African American minorities and was shocked to discover that Robbie had also been kidnapped. After his first clash with the Crime Master, Spider-Man was brutally beaten by the Crime Master's enforcer Sandman until he was rescued by federal agent Jean DeWolf. Spider-Man then teamed up with DeWolf to stop the Crime Master, eventually deducing that Dr. Octavius was involved in the kidnappings. Spider-Man traveled to Octavius' laboratory on Ellis Island, where he was shocked to discover that the Doctor was aligned with the Friends of New Germany, an American Nazi sympathizing organization, and had been experimenting on the abducted African American minorities to turn them into mindless slaves. Spider-Man freed the prisoners, but arrived too late to save Robbie, who had already been lobotomized. He clashed with the Crime Master a second time when the mob boss took Robbie hostage just before DeWolf's agents reached the island. After getting Robbie to safety, Peter learned that the Crime Master had supposedly killed Felicia Hardy, who was revealed to be the Crime Master's own lover. Spider-Man then witnessed Octavius betray and kill the Crime Master, and then Spider-Man tried to strangle Octavius to death for his crimes and for what he'd done to Robbie, but was stopped by DeWolf. Back in Manhattan, Spider-Man learned from DeWolf that Felicia had actually survived and went to her apartment to see her. There, her bodyguard told him she was recovering from her injuries but never wanted to see Spider-Man again, as she blamed him for her condition since the Crime Master had discovered her secret feelings for the vigilante and attacked her because of it. After this, Peter went on to have several adventures across the multiverse alongside other Spider-Men. Arachknight. In the main Marvel universe, after gaining the Infinity Stones, Gamora trapped every soul in the universe inside the Soul Gem. To keep those souls helpless, she folded the universe in half, causing each soul to merge with another. This created Warp World, a pocket dimension where history was rewritten to fit the newly fused beings. Within Warp World, Spider-Man and Moon Knight were merged into a single being called Arachknight. In the Warp World, when Peter Parker was a child, he visited the World Science Festival at the American Museum of Natural History with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. On the way home, Peter talked them into walking through Central Park instead of taking a cab. They were attacked by a mysterious monster known as Goblin by Night. Ben and May were killed, and Peter was fatally wounded. As he lay dying, Peter was bitten by a mystical spider. This saved his life and gave him superpowers, but it also split his mind into 4 separate personalities. Peter first tried to suppress these voices, but eventually chose to let each one take control of his body at different times, effectively dividing his life among them. The first alter, called the Arachnid, is the dominant personality of Arachknight and is mostly light-hearted, as it enjoys taunting enemies with jokes and quips. The second alter, known as the Knight, is darker and more aggressive, acting serious and intense, but is most effective at finishing off fights with criminals. It also serves as Peter's fight or flight response, taking over when things get especially dangerous. The third alter, called CEO Peter, is the confident head of Parker Industries. The fourth alter, Science Peter, is a passionate working scientist who is afraid of heights and the least athletic of the 4. Over time, Peter became a successful businessman running Parker Industries while secretly working as the vigilante Arachknight. His best friend Harry Russell served as his right-hand man in both roles, often stepping in to make sure the CEO persona showed up when the company needed him. One day, Peter discovered that Harry's father was in fact able to transform into the Goblin by Night, and as Arachknight, Peter tracked him to Central Park and beat him down. Harry then tased Peter from behind, and once Norman turned back into his human form, Harry took him away. Harry brought his injured father to the sublevels of Parker Industries for treatment, but Norman transformed again and went on a rampage, which included biting Harry on the neck. The Goblin tore through the building until reaching Peter, who beat him down once again. Just as Peter was about to deliver the killing blow, a dying Harry arrived on a prototype glider and talked him out of killing Norman, pointing out that Norman hadn't been in control when he killed Ben and May, but Peter's revenge would be a deliberate choice. Harry then suddenly transformed into the Goblin himself and fled on the glider. Norman revealed that his bite had passed the curse on to his son, and Peter promised Norman that they'd work together to find a cure for Harry. After Gamora was defeated, Adam Warlock chose to preserve Warp World with a facet of the Soul Gem so that beings created there wouldn't simply disappear. Within Warp World, several of the heroes of Arachknight later decided to band together and formed a team known as the Defenders. The Hunter. On Earth 11209, Spider-Man ignored Madam Web's warning and, in a fit of rage, killed Kraven the Hunter. Horrified by what he'd done, he initially quit being Spider-Man to settle down with Mary Jane Watson, but he couldn't stay away from the fight, and eventually returned to the role, this time without any hesitation about killing his enemies. He hunted down and killed several of his foes, including Norman Osborn, and when Mary Jane confronted him about it, he concluded that the world didn't need a Spider-Man anymore. It needed a hunter to protect the herd. So he gave up his Spider-Man identity entirely and became the Hunter, taking over Kraven's old role. Meanwhile, Madame Web tried to convince Anya Corazon to take over as the new Spider-Girl, but she initially refused. With no replacement lined up, Madame Web instead recruited Venom, Spider-Woman, and Anti-Venom to fight Peter directly. They succeeded in killing Peter's pack, but Peter killed all three of them in return and left Madame Web seriously injured. Before dying, Madame Web managed to teleport Anya so that she could fight Peter. Peter initially had the upper hand and fired his gun at her, but it misfired and blinded him instead, giving Anya the advantage. Peter begged her to kill him, telling her that anyone he hurt afterward would be on her conscience, but Anya chose to spare him rather than kill him, echoing the choice Spider-Man made in the mainline universe. As a result, Peter was left to live out an ordinary life while Anya took up the mantle of Spider-Girl. Old Man Symbiote. On Earth 1089, the Venom symbiote bonded with Spider-Man during the Secret Wars, just as it did on Earth 616, but in this reality, Spider-Man didn't learn what the black suit actually was until later in the bonding process, and once he understood, he could no longer separate himself from it. Mr. Fantastic and Doctor Strange both attempted to free him from the symbiote, but neither succeeded. Thus, the symbiote permanently bonded with Spider-Man, taking control of his mind and feeding off his adrenaline, which caused him to age at an accelerated rate. Once his body could no longer support the symbiote, it used him to get close to the Hulk so it could transfer itself to him, abandoning Spider-Man in the process. As a result of the rapid aging, Peter had become physically equivalent to being 85 years old. After saying his goodbyes, Mr. Fantastic found him dead, surrounded by research he had conducted into finding a way to kill the symbiote. A funeral was then held for Peter, which was attended by the Avengers. Bloodline Peter Parker. On Earth 29320, Peter Parker's life unfolded much like his mainstream Marvel counterparts, although in this version of events he married Mary Jane Watson, and the couple had a son together named Ben. When Ben was still young, New York City came under attack from a villain named Cadaverous and his forces. Spider-Man fought to defend the city's citizens, but was badly hurt in the process, suffering a mauled right arm. As Mary Jane rushed to his side, Cadaverous and his minions closed in on them. His forces overpowered Spider-Man, and while he was helpless to stop it, Cadaverous impaled Mary Jane and threw her off a bridge, killing her. 12 years later, Peter had stopped being Spider-Man. Now working full-time as a reporter, he was constantly on the road, which left him distant from his son. Ben was being raised mostly by Aunt May, and Peter was haunted by the feeling that he was failing both of them. During a brief stop back in New York between flights, Peter got a call from Ben's school principal since Ben had gotten into another fight defending someone from a bully. Peter picked him up and urged him to stop stepping in to help others, worried it would only get him into trouble, which led to an argument between the pair. Ben stormed off, and Peter went to catch his flight. But before boarding, he spoke briefly with May on the phone, and she urged him to be more present for his son. Ben met a girl named Faye in detention, and the two hit it off. That night, he dreamed about his mother, then woke up clinging to the ceiling, a sign his spider powers had switched on. Aunt May, who seemed to have been waiting for this exact moment, helped him down and sent him digging through his father's old things in the attic, where he found the original Spider-Man suit. However, it was Faye who convinced Ben to actually put on the suit and start working as a vigilante. 12 years following the initial attack, Cadaverous returned. To draw Ben out, Cadaverous kidnapped Peter and used him as bait, since the inherited genetic changes running through the Parker bloodline meant he needed blood from both father and son to finish his revival serum. While trying to save his dad, Ben got help from one of Cadaverous's mind-controlled drones who guided him out of the villain's lair. Peter asked the drone who they were, and he got back a single-word response. Tiger, the nickname Mary Jane always called him, meaning MJ was alive after all, turned into one of Cadaverous's brainwashed servants. For the final fight, Tony Stark and Riri Williams suited up as Iron Man and Ironheart to assist Ben in the fight. Mary Jane, while still trapped under Cadaverous's control, broke through it for just long enough to shield Ben, giving him the chance to physically tear out the chip, enslaving her. As the battle collapsed into chaos, an explosion put both Ben and the newly freed Mary Jane in danger, while on the same bridge where she had apparently died 12 years before. Peter then threw himself into the blast's path to save them both. He'd already taken a fatal wound earlier in the fight and wasn't going to make it regardless, but the sacrifice let him die shielding the family he'd spent more than a decade holding at arm's length out of guilt and fear. Sometime later, following the hero's victory, Nick Fury handed Ben and a revived, newly spider-powered Mary Jane suits of their own. Mother and son taking up the mantle Peter had once carried, then abandoned, and finally reclaimed just long enough to save them both. Spider-Ben. On Earth 3145, Ben Parker gained spider powers after being bitten by a radioactive spider while attending a science demonstration with his nephew Peter. Rather than following Peter's suggestion to use his abilities for show business, Ben chose to use his powers to help others as a hero. However, he eventually retired, grief-stricken, after his mortal enemy, the Emerald Elf, the Norman Osborn of this universe, uncovered his secret identity and murdered both May and Peter. Ben was later contacted by Ezekiel Sims, who warned him that Morlun, the multiversal spider totem hunter, was coming to kill him. Having already lost everything, Ben accepted Ezekiel's help and was kept safe in a secret bunker within Sims' tower. He remained there after his Earth was devastated by a thermonuclear war, which was the result of a scheme by Dr. Octopus going terribly wrong. Count Parker. On Earth 25593, Peter Parker attempted to save his dying Uncle Ben by experimenting with the venom of an immortal vampire spider, but the experiment instead turned him into a vampire. He became known as Count Parker and established himself in a mansion on the outskirts of a small town where he spent hundreds of years conducting experiments to create human-animal hybrids. Mary Jane Van Helsing was a skilled vampire hunter who accepted a job to kill Count Parker. She broke through the defenses of his manor with ease and confronted him directly, ultimately gaining the upper hand in their fight. Just as she was about to stake him, she had a vision of herself and Parker as a happy couple across the multiverse. That moment of hesitation gave the Count the opening he needed to bite her and turn her into a vampire. Mary Jane then became his vampiric bride, embracing her new undead existence alongside him and enjoying its pleasures. The Lizard. On Earth 65, Peter Parker grew up as a close childhood friend of Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy before Gwen took on her later identity as the vigilante Spider-Woman. Peter was bullied throughout his youth for being nerdy and awkward, earning the cruel nickname Pathetic Parker from his tormentors, with Gwen frequently stepping in to defend him. This treatment left him increasingly bitter toward his classmates over time. When Spider-Woman first appeared, Peter became a devoted fan of hers, but this only intensified the bullying he faced at school, and he found himself wishing he could have powers of his own like the heroine he admired. Eventually, worn down by the years of mistreatment, he stole a formula developed by Dr. Kurt Connors that had originally been created for a science fair project. Using it, Peter transformed himself into the Lizard, seeking to take revenge on those who had abused him for so long. Peter then transformed into the Lizard at his school's prom after enduring more bullying from his classmates and watching Harry ask Gwen to be his date, which left him fuming with jealousy and embarrassment since he had romantic feelings for Gwen. He went on a rampage through the school, eventually clashing with Spider-Woman in battle. He was killed during the confrontation, transforming back into his human form as he died and telling her that he had only wanted to be special like her. Life Story. On Earth 19529, Spider-Man and other Marvel heroes began their careers at the same time their comics were originally published, with time afterward passing in real time, similar to the real world. A major turning point in this universe was Tony Stark's choice to take a more hands-on role as Iron Man during the Vietnam War. This decision ramped up tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, prolonged the Vietnam War, and eventually sparked a larger World War-level conflict called the Russian War. This war began in 1984 and involved nuclear missiles destroying the town of Allentown, Pennsylvania, while many American superheroes were vanished to Battleworld during the original Secret Wars. The United States ultimately won the Russian War sometime before 1995, though the exact date isn't specified. After the September 11, 2001 attacks, Tony Stark gained significant political power, becoming Secretary of Defense and pushing through the Superhuman Registration Act. This law divided the superhero community, and Doctor Doom took advantage of that division to seize control of the planet. Turning our attention back to 1962, 15-year-old Peter Parker was bitten by the radioactive spider. After his uncle Ben was murdered, Peter finally grasped the lesson that Ben had tried to teach him, that with great power must also come great responsibility. This realization led him to become the crime-fighting superhero Spider-Man. At 19, Peter landed an internship at the Baxter Building under Reed Richards and went on to spend the next decade working alongside Reed and later Otto Octavius at the Future Foundation. After the death of his wife Gwen Stacy, Peter fell in love with and married Mary Jane Watson. She gave birth to the couple's twin children, Claire and Benjamin, while Peter was away participating in the Secret Wars. When he returned to New York wearing a black symbiote suit, Peter was attacked and buried alive by Kraven the Hunter, who wanted to replace him as New York's protector. The symbiote helped Peter dig himself out of the grave, but it also fueled a blinding rage that nearly drove him to kill Kraven. Mary Jane stopped him by firing a sonic gun that separated Peter from the symbiote, but the trauma of the incident led her to leave Peter, taking their children across the country to raise them in Portland. By 1995, Peter felt unfulfilled by his life, finding no satisfaction in being Spider-Man or in his role as CEO of Parker Industries. Still separated from Mary Jane, he began an affair with private investigator Jessica Jones, whom he'd hired to track the recently released from prison Norman Osborn. Otto Octavius then abducted Peter, intending to study both him and his clone Ben to reverse engineer Miles Warren's cloning experiments and possibly find a way to escape his own death. During the analysis, Otto claimed that Peter was actually the clone and Ben was the original, sending Ben into a rage that led him to attack Otto. When Peter tried to hold Ben back, Otto lunged at them with one of his mechanical arms, and as Ben's spider sense led him to dodge the attack, Harry Osborn jumped in front of Peter and was killed protecting him. Afterward, Peter gave Ben his life and company, choosing instead to move to Portland to try to live quietly with his family. Before leaving, he confronted Norman Osborn, who was living in a garage in New Jersey, revealing that he knew Osborn had manipulated the data Otto had used and that Peter had been the original all along. When told of Harry's death, Osborn attacked Peter, but the shock triggered a heart attack and the elderly man died, cursing Peter with his last breath. Peter later returned to New York to attend J. Jonah Jameson's funeral in September of 2001, during which the September 11th terrorist attacks occurred. Wearing Ben's red mask to conceal his identity, Peter did what he could to help. 5 years later, Ben was killed by the vampiric Morlun, an event that indirectly exposed Peter as Spider-Man to the public. Peter initially planned to flee the country to draw Morlun away from his family, but his daughter Claire convinced him to go to New York instead and tell his story to the Daily Bugle. There, Tony Stark, now the United States Secretary of Defense, confronted Peter on the steps of Parker Industries and pressured him to sign the Superhuman Registration Act, subtly threatening to seize his company if he refused. When Parker rejected the offer, Tony's Avengers team, named the US Avengers, attacked him, but Captain America's own team of Avengers intervened. This gave Parker enough time to slip into the building and suit up as Spider-Man. Peter disarmed the US Avengers by triggering a fail-safe built into their armor, correctly suspecting Tony had installed it out of distrust for his own team. Peter then fled the scene alongside Captain America's Avengers. 13 years later, in 2019, Peter was one of the last surviving senior heroes, most others having been killed or forced into hiding since the Civil War and Doctor Doom's rise to global power. Because of his age and experience, Peter became the leader of the resistance against Doom's rule. Eventually, Peter and Miles Morales set out on a mission to reach the Doomsday Machine, an orbital space station Stark had left behind as a last resort to shut down Doom's technology worldwide. Aboard the station, the two were attacked by Kraven, now bonded to the symbiote, and Peter soon realized that Miles' mind had actually been taken over by Otto Octavius. Peter and Otto faced off in a final mental confrontation, one that Peter won thanks to the memory of Aunt May. As the space station began to collapse, Peter made Otto promise he would restore Miles' mind and launched an escape pod to safety. Peter then tried to hold the crumbling station together with his webbing long enough for the Doomsday Pulse to activate. When his webbing ran out and the station started tearing apart around him, the symbiote stepped in, holding the station together just long enough for the pulse to fire. Peter, accepting his inevitable fate, closed his eyes moments before the station detonated, his final thoughts turning to Mary Jane. Web of Shadows. Spider-Man Web of Shadows is a 2008 video game where the player chooses whether Spider-Man walks a path of either villainy or heroism. In the universe of the game, Peter Parker had roughly the same origin and powers as the mainline Spider-Man, including a stint bonded to the Venom symbiote. Once he separated from it, the symbiote found its way to a disgraced reporter named Eddie Brock, who held Peter responsible for ruining his career and became Venom. The two clashed a few times before agreeing to a temporary truce, which eventually collapsed years later. The game begins with Spider-Man searching Manhattan for Mary Jane Watson during a citywide symbiote invasion. He found her alongside Luke Cage, but was suddenly ambushed by an unknown assailant. The story then flashes back 4 days to show how the crisis began. There, Spider-Man clashed with Venom, whose symbiote latched onto him and restored his black suit, letting him defeat Venom and drive him off. He then helped Luke Cage defuse a gang war between the Park Avenues and the Rolling Sevens in Harlem, brokering a parley between the rival leaders, foiling a sniper assassination attempt against them, and uncovering evidence that Kingpin had engineered the whole conflict. In the good outcome, he uses that evidence to end the war peacefully, while in the dark outcome, he lets the gangs kill each other, enraging Luke Cage. On his way to Fisk Tower to confront Kingpin, Spider-Man instead spotted Black Cat fleeing and, with Moon Knight's help, caught and defeated her, learning she had been posing as a double agent against Kingpin to win his affection. In the good outcome, Peter rejects Black Cat and allies with Moon Knight, while in the bad outcome, he accepts her feelings and partners with her instead. He then uncovered Vulture's role overseeing production of Goblin gliders, and after beating him, either webbed him up and swung off or webbed him up and recruited him. Later, while fighting through Kingpin's men, Spider-Man was suddenly attacked by deranged wall-climbing civilians, then confronted in Hell's Kitchen by Wolverine, who attacked him after smelling the symbiote inside him before being convinced Spider-Man had it under control and joining him in a second clash with Venom, who again fled while having it revealed that the wall-climbing civilians had themselves been infected by symbiotes. As the outbreak worsened, Black Widow's SHIELD team arrived and set up quarantine camps across the city. Unable to bring about any scientific help, Spider-Man reluctantly broke the Tinkerer out of Rikers Island with Rhino's assistance so the Tinkerer could build a device that could kill the symbiotes without harming their hosts. Meanwhile, SHIELD destroyed the Manhattan Bridge to contain the spread, and Spider-Man helped secure Kingpin's cooperation and escort civilians to safety. Spider-Man next fought and defeated symbiote Electro, helped defend the SHIELD base at Stark Tower, joined Moon Knight in protecting Spectre Tower, and aided Wolverine with a civilian evacuation, during which Wolverine himself was infected, and Spider-Man then defeated him. Spider-Man was then attacked by a symbiote-infected Black Cat, but with Mary Jane's help he defeated her, though she was left severely injured, and he either hands her to MJ to be nursed back to health, or shares part of his own symbiote with her, which fractures his bond with MJ. Meanwhile, SHIELD installed the Tinkerer's finished device at Trask Industries, only for symbiote Vulture and his Vulturelings to launch an aerial assault. Spider-Man defeated symbiote Vulture and cured him. Following this in the game's dark ending, Spider-Man embraces the full power of the symbiote suit and learns Venom was attacking the SHIELD helicarrier. After a final battle with Venom, Spider-Man forced Venom into the engine himself and escaped alone. After Spider-Man defeated Venom, he took control of the symbiotes as their ruler. In the darkest ending, the symbiote-infected Black Cat joined Spider-Man to help him lead the symbiotes and became his new lover. Apaec. Apaec the Decapitator was a god worshipped by Peru's Moche people from roughly the 1st to 8th centuries AD. He is a monstrous hybrid creature, having a man's upper body joined to a spider's lower body, snakes for hair, long sharp teeth, and a taste for cruelty and bloodletting. Eventually, in the main Marvel universe, he was captured by the US government and locked away in the Special Containment Center, a secret underwater supermax prison built for the world's most dangerous individuals. After losing the siege of Asgard, Norman Osborn was also sent there, where he met Father Kohlmeyer, a secret devotee of Apaec who set the god free. After a brief rampage through the facility, Osborn offered to free everyone present if they helped him escape. In the escape, the group fled the prison by submarine, but the facility exploded and damaged the vessel. Apaec left the sub and sealed it in a web that supplied oxygen, then pushed it to the surface himself. Osborn later turned himself in and was sent to the Raft prison, while Apaec went home to the Peruvian jungle. After breaking out of the Raft, Osborn began building his Hammer organization and assembling a new team of Dark Avengers. One of the people he brought in was Apaec, and Osborn gave a genetic modification drug to the god to reshape him into a form resembling Spider-Man but with 4 extra arms. As part of this team, Apaec battled the mainstream Avengers and later served under Luke Cage's Thunderbolts-turned-Dark Avengers group once its members were fitted with restraining nanites. Physically, Apaec's spider-like body let him cling to walls and other surfaces, and he could spin organic webbing from his forearms, though unlike Spider-Man, he had no precognitive spider sense, leaving him open to surprise attacks. He could also wrap himself in a bell-shaped web to breathe underwater indefinitely, much like a real-world diving bell spider. As a divine being, he is essentially immortal, immune to disease, and able to heal wounds at superhuman speed, though regrowing fully severed limbs or organs required magical help. Carl King. In the main Marvel universe, Carl King grew up as a bully to Peter Parker. As a kid, he saw Peter get bitten by the spider that gave him his powers, and later saw Peter using those newfound abilities. Wanting powers of his own, Carl tracked down the spider after it had died and ate it. This slowly caused his body to disintegrate into a swarm functioning as a single hive mind. He first realized what had happened to him when he accidentally devoured his own mother from within and then puppeted her remains. Since each person he consumed made him stronger, he went on to kill and absorb his father and his girlfriend as well, working toward becoming powerful enough to defeat Spider-Man. Carl secretly watched Spider-Man for a long time before finally making his move to attack him and try to take over his body and powers. He killed Jess Patton and used her skin as a disguise, then approached Peter, claiming she had just been kicked out by her boyfriend. When he later got the chance to catch Peter alone at his apartment, he knocked him out and tied him to a chair, intending to take his skin next. Before he could, a neighbor came by to ask about the noise, so Carl killed and ate him instead. This gave Peter the time to break free, and a fight broke out between them. During the struggle, Carl accidentally struck a fuse box, and the resulting explosion wiped out most of the spiders making up his body. Only one spider survived, escaping to the street outside, but it was crushed underfoot by a passerby who had no idea what it was, finally killing Carl for good. Brian Kornfield. In the main Marvel universe, Brian Kornfield grew up on Broadway in New York City, raised by his single mother after his father died when he was still young. He grew up admiring the city's superheroes and at one point even wrote a letter trying to reach out to Spider-Man, but everything changed when his mother was attacked in a mugging, leaving him consumed by a desire for revenge and justice. This desire for revenge led him to Dwarf, a servant of the demon Chthon. Dwarf offered him powers modeled after Spider-Man's abilities, and by tapping into the dark magic of the Darkhold, Brian transformed into Spider-X, paying for his new powers with his soul. This gave him superhuman strength, speed, stamina, durability, agility, and reflexes, well beyond what any human could achieve. Like Spider-Man, he could stick to walls, and he had a spider sense so sharp it verged on predicting the future. He could also spin organic webbing mixed with a strong acid. Unlike Spider-Man, Spider-X's transformation gave him extra monstrous traits, such as 4 additional spider-like limbs, fangs that could fire blasts of energy, and venomous acidic saliva. On top of that, he could breathe fire and had a healing factor. With these new abilities, Brian hunted down and killed the man who had attacked his mother. Then, believing his purpose in life was to deliver justice, he began targeting as many criminals as he could. Eventually, Spider-X clashed with the mutant Paralyzer, who had tapped into a power station's electrical energy in an attempt to recreate the being known as Zax. The plan succeeded, and Spider-X found himself facing the reconstituted energy creature directly. In the ensuing battle, several heroes pooled their combined powers against Zax, triggering a massive explosion that destroyed the creature, but also claimed the life of Spider-X. April Parker. On Earth 982, May Parker was the future first child of Peter and Mary Jane Parker. Shortly after her birth, Norman Osborn secretly kidnapped her and had her cloned as part of an experiment called Project Changeling. He kept the clone in a stasis chamber for years, and during that time he altered her genetics, replacing roughly 35% of her DNA with material from a symbiote, making her the first human symbiote hybrid clone. This symbiote material came from fragments of the Venom symbiote, but unlike a true symbiote bond, it had no consciousness of its own, so she never had to share her mind with a second personality. This clone was created as part of Norman Osborn's larger scheme to achieve immortality by transforming into a goblin-like creature. 16 years after her creation, the Goblin Queen discovered her stasis chamber hidden in a secret Oscorp lab. When Peter Parker went to investigate the chamber, he was knocked out by the Goblin Queen, and the clone, now called New May, broke free. New May then started stalking and getting in conflicts with the real May Parker. Over time, it was shown that although the real May wouldn't kill, New May had no such limits. Later, after May was badly hurt in an explosion, New May took the opportunity to step into May's life. However, the real May eventually returned, and after a conflict which brought about the death of Norman Osborn, a truce between May and New May, and legitimate confusion about which one was the real May, May suggested bringing the clone into their family as the sister she'd always wanted. Peter was wary of her, but Mary Jane agreed, and the clone took the name April. She enrolled in May's school under the cover story that they were cousins. The two Spider-Girls soon settled into a shared life as both sisters and partners in crime. But April proved far more rebellious and ruthless than May, often needing May to hold her back. Eventually, April's jealousy of May pushed her to break off on her own as the anti-hero Mayhem, who went on to kill Tombstone and later the Hobgoblin after wrongly believing he'd killed May. Man Mountain Marco also hired her to kill Black Tarantula, a job she nearly finished before Spider-Girl stepped in to stop her. Eventually, being that she was still convinced she was the real May, April tried to force May into giving up being Spider-Girl and confessing that she was the clone, which triggered a fight between the pair. In one possible future, that fight ended with May dying when the warehouse they were battling in exploded, leading to a timeline where clones of the Carnage symbiote took over the world. To prevent that outcome, April from that future timeline traveled back in time and shared her memories with her younger self. Realizing the world needed May more than it needed her, April chose to sacrifice herself to stop that future from happening, letting May live. Before dying, she admitted she truly was the clone and asked May to tell their family how much she loved them. May was devastated by April's death, but Peter reassured her that clones have a strange habit of finding a way to always come back. Blood Spider. On Earth 616, Blood Spider trained alongside Jagged Bow and Death Shield under Taskmaster, who prepared the three of them to copy Spider-Man's fighting style specifically so they could kill him. When Matt Murdock placed a bounty on Daredevil's head to lure out Bullseye, Blood Spider was among the villains who took the bait and tried to collect, only to be beaten with little effort. He met his apparent end when Venom burned him alive, yet he turned up again in stories set later on, leaving it unclear whether the original Blood Spider came back or someone new simply took over the Blood Spider mantle. In combat against Solo and Spider-Man, Blood Spider showed off reflexes and strength well beyond human norms, punching through a wall and dodging Solo's gunfire. Since Taskmaster chose him specifically to master Spider-Man's moves, it's reasonable to assume his physical abilities lined up closely with Spider-Man's, likely covering similar strength, reflexes, and agility, and possibly some form of wall-crawling ability, whether built into his powers or achieved through gear. What other lore videos would you like to see? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to the next video with all of you.